Rule 0. In every role-playing game, in every edition of those games, there is one golden rule, an ultimate truth of the gaming world. That one rule is known as Rule 0. Simply put, it states that the rules are nothing more than guidelines. In the end, a game of Dungeons & Dragons, or any other RPG, is about getting a group of people together to tell a story, not to act out a set of rules. Story will always trump the rules. Just because the books say that a failed attempt means that a character is going to die, doesn't mean that you can't have them just almost die. If players want to take an action that isn't listed in the rules, then you are free to make up the rules. If a player wants to buy a magical item that you feel is just too powerful, then you don't have to have anyone willing to make it or sell it. If a character wants to learn a power that is too powerful, then the power doesn't exist in the game world. That's the best thing about role-playing games. It is your game. No one is going to come around and force you to play how they want you to play. So take a deep breath, relax, and get ready to enter the fantasy world of Dungeons & Dragons. A world of your own imagination. Pick an edition, any edition. Over the years, there have been several editions of the Dungeons & Dragons game. Each edition has its own pros and cons, as well as its hardcore fans because of them. While the rules between these editions have either minor or major changes, the basics of playing D&D have never changed. So once I've explained to you what each edition is like, and you have picked the one that is going to work best for you and your group, you'll need to read the rulebooks. Players only need to read the Player's Handbook, PHB, and Dungeon Masters, DM, will need to read the Dungeon Master Guide, DMG, and Monster Manual, MM, books. Ah, the Red Book. For the very old school, this is how D&D was played in the 70s and early 80s. The wonderful thing about this edition is that you can find them for cheap online, in garage sales, and at used bookstores. Also, this version of the game is the simplest to learn, as the Red Book includes a learn-to-play solo adventures for one player. Setting up for the game is very simple, and you can use an index card to write down all your character's game information. The downside is that the rules are the most constricting on creating a truly custom character. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, AD&D, is just that, a more advanced version of the original Dungeons & Dragons. This version took new rules introduced as optional in the book Unearth Arcana and made them part of the core game. This version also made classes different from the races so that you can have dwarf wizards and halfling clerics. Because of the removal of limits on character creation, this edition became more popular than the original D&D, even with the more complex rules. This edition also marked the rise of published adventures, or modules, which were ready to play as soon as the DM got them home. Modules for AD&D are still being printed to this day under the name Osric. While not truly a new edition, AD&D 2nd Edition was more a reissuing of AD&D that was streamlined and edited down to make the gameplay smoother. This made AD&D backwards compatible with the AD&D modules, meaning that you can use these editions together with only minor tweaks. 2nd Edition also focused on character customization with the class books as well as the options series. Each character class in the game had its own book with kits, which allowed for players to play with subclass by being more focused on one class ability over the others. Skills and powers allowed players to build their own sub-races and classes, as well as play monstrous creatures. Combat and tactics gave new rules for handling different types of combat, ranging from duels to massive battles, as well as combat actions. High-level campaigns allowed players to take their characters beyond the normal 20 levels in the core books. The downside to all this customization was that it caused the rules to become overly complex. Wizards of the Coast created Dungeons & Dragons 3rd Edition when they took over the D&D brand when they bought out the original makers, TSR. 3rd Edition was the first edition to fully streamline the dice rolling rules. Before, there were times when you either wanted to roll high or low numbers that would get confusing to new players. Starting with this edition, the goal was to roll the highest number you could. Also, this edition simplified the type of dice used by having players only roll a 20-sided die for all actions and only use the other dice for damage of weapons and spells. This is the birth of the D20 system. Unlike the full customization that 2nd Edition allows, Level 1 players could customize their characters as they leveled up. Because of some overlooked issues from playtesting, Wizards released an updated version called 3.5, as well as free errata downloads for the already published books that were not reprinted. During this era, it seemed that a new sourcebook with new monsters, equipment, spells, and abilities were printed each month by Wizards. Also, because of the open gaming license, large numbers of sourcebooks and modules were produced by secondhand companies. This led to a problem of broken interactions that allowed players to create godlike characters at very low levels, as well as flooding gaming stores with tons of related products. Fourth was Wizards' answer to the flooded market and broken rules. This edition returned to the limitations of the original and advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Characters became limited to just one class, with only being able to pick up a touch of another class's abilities. Powers became limited based on their effectiveness. The most powerful abilities could only be used once a day, medium abilities were only used once in an encounter, and the weakest abilities could be used at will. This edition had the most streamlined combat rules, but is also the most limited for character creation. The other advantage of this edition is that it is currently supported by Wizards of the Coast with D&D Encounters. This is a weekly gaming night program hosted by gaming stores, so that it is easy to find a group playing D&D Encounters at your local gaming store. In the end, it's up to you and your group what edition you're going to pick up. Maybe you'll head up and pick out the latest edition, or rock it old school with some vintage gaming. Still, you're going to need some gear. Dungeons & Dragons is a social game. That means you're going to need friends to play, and by friends, I mean real human beings, not pets or fuzzy animals. If you're not a total antisocial shut-in basement troll, then you should have these already, or you live at home with family members who are willing to play. So if you have a group to play with, feel free to skip ahead. Alright, finding other gamers to play with is not that hard. I would say that it is even easier than finding a date for Saturday night. The key is to go where the gamers are and just introducing yourself, or putting up a flyer, announcing that you're looking for a group. Now, I just want to remind you that there are a lot of weirdos in the world. When you make up a flyer or post your contact info online, remember that less is more. Never give out too much information about yourself. All you really need to post are your first name, phone number, email, and what edition of the game you are looking to play. Also, it's best that when you first meet other players to meet at a neutral location. No one is going to feel comfortable coming over to a stranger's house or apartment to meet for the first time. A good idea is to meet up at a traditional gamer hangout. This is good because these are the kind of places that you are going to put up these flyers to find new players. So let's look at the different gamer hangouts. Internet forums. Wizards of the Coast, and as well as a number of secondhand websites, all offer forums where players can share ideas on official products as well as homebrewed materials. Simply type Dungeons & Dragons forums into your internet search engine of choice and start surfing around. All of these forums offer a thread where players can post their contact info so that other players in the area can meet them. True, this doesn't make for a good place for a first meeting, but it does link to internet cafes. If there's one thing that gamers love more than free Wi-Fi, it is coffee. Chances are all you need to do to find gamers at a cafe is to hang out reading the rulebooks until one walks up to you. Coffee shops are also a great neutral group to meet up with new people and play out your first few games. Cafes love having people spend time there because it means people will buy more coffee. If you do start gaming at the local cafe, ask first to see if you can plan to meet up there on slow nights. This is so you don't end up trying to play D&D during open mic night. Also remember to clean up after yourself and to tip the server well so that your group will stay in good standing with the cafe. Schools. I shouldn't have to say this, but only put flyers up at the school that matches your age group. In most high schools, you're going to run into a roadblock for trying to start a Dungeons & Dragons after-school club. But if you find a teacher that has played and is willing to do the spin of how the game has educational values, reading and writing, skills, statistics, probability, and creative problem solving, you'll be golden. At the college level, you will have no problem finding players and free spaces to play. At either level, you can simply put up flyers on bulletin boards or join a gaming club if your school offers one. Bookstores. Even if your local bookstore doesn't have a role-playing games section, that doesn't mean that isn't going to be a great place to recruit players. This is because bookstores sell the books, magazines, and comic books that gamers love to read. Like internet forums, this isn't a place to meet face-to-face unless it has a cafe or lounge. Still, you can ask to put up a flyer. Movie theaters. Another place to ask to hang a flyer is your local movie theater. Chances are, if it's a large chain theater, they might say no. But you shouldn't have a problem with a small, privately run one. Best idea is to hang up the flyer when a fantasy movie has its opening weekend. It's simple logic that the Dungeons & Dragons players are going to want to see a sword and sorcery movie. Gaming stores. If you were lucky enough to have a gaming store in your hometown or city, then finding a group to play with is as easy as shooting fish in a barrel. Because of the D&D encounters, the officially sanctioned play for the current edition, most gaming stores will have a D&D night. If your local shop isn't enrolled in the D&D Encounters program, ask to see if you could start one. Facebook or Twitter. Simply just posting a status asking if anyone wants to play might find you a group with ease. Chances are you might have to use a group page instead of your personal feed. This would be on the Facebook pages of different locations above. In this computer age, people are more likely to read a post than they are to notice a flyer on a bulletin board or window. T-shirts. Why just post your flyers up at local gamer haunts when you can take it everywhere you go? If you don't have the artistic skills to make a shirt yourself, you can always order a custom-made one online. All you need is a catchy line that will let others know you want to play D&D. Will DM for pizza or Got D&D are simple examples. Some websites even have a number of D&D humor shirts that will draw the attention of other gamers. Alright, now that you've found yourself a group, it's time to move on to what you will need to play the game. Gearing up. No matter the edition, the gaming supplies that are needed by Dungeons & Dragons players hasn't changed over the years. For the most basic supplies, you just need some dice, paper, and pencils. Granted, just as with any other hobby, the more you are willing to put into it, the more you can get out of it. So let's start with the basics. He who dies with the most dice wins. Unknown gamer. All you really need is a basic set of polyhedron dice. That is a set 6 dice. A 4-sided, a 6-sided, an 8-sided, a 10-sided, and a 20-sided die. To find these dice, you'll have to head down to your local gaming store, where you can find sets as well as individual dice. If you don't have a local gaming store, you can order them from a bookstore or online website. Just ask or search for D&D dice. Pencil and paper. Either for taking notes, writing down your own adventures, or making character sheets, you're going to need writing tools. In the modern age, some people have opted to go high-tech and bring computers or tablets to the table. I would advise against this because it's easy for players to get distracted by instant messengers or other games. If a computer does need to be used at the table, it should be used only by the Dungeon Master or with his permission. The Dungeon Master's screen is a must for any DM. On the outside, they might have colorful images or commonly used tables for the players to reference. Inside are all the tables that a DM will need to reference over and over during a game. Also, this gives a private area so that the DM can have his notes and maps out without allowing the players to gain information from them. Graphing paper. I can't stress the importance of having graph paper on hand. I've only taken one advanced math class in the past 13 years, but I still have a pad of graph paper in my backpack. The reason being that not only does it help you to keep personal maps of the dungeon as a player, but it also allows the DM to have full maps of the dungeon they are building for the adventure. If you have some folders, you can keep collections of past dungeons to reuse them over and over. Trust me, graphing paper is the most used item after the rulebooks and dice. Maps. A number of adventures that are published these days come with large maps that can be used with miniatures. You can also buy battle mats, which can be used with washable markers. If you don't have either maps or a mat, you can make do by using large sheets of paper and dividing it into 1-inch squares, then drawing your maps over these. You can use just about anything to represent players and monsters, from paper cutouts to miniatures. Not many people are willing to invest in miniatures because of the expense or because they don't have the artistic talents to paint them. Wizards of the Coast has a large line of plastic minis that come already painted that you can buy new in sealed packs or used individually. If you have a model building hobby, there are hordes of pewter minis that you can buy at gaming stores and online shops. These pewter minis need assembly as well as painting, but allow you to have a custom collection of personally selected and colored minis. Granted, until you're ready to invest in minis, you should check out the DIY projects in Section 4 for how to make reusable placeholders. Now that you have all your gear, it's time to spend some time creating characters.